also freedom of religion.
So, it's interesting going back to your analogy about, reviewing a football play. Technology has certainly changed the definitions and added to those rules of what is a catch. I mean, cameras have gotten so much better that you can see the moment a ball comes, to further define what is. And I think that is slowly what is happening with some of these cases at the state Supreme Court, the federal Supreme Court, with the open social platforms like Twitter and Facebook and these other things. And in MCL 37.2302, they're talking about, they say the words post. And we know that not to be a Facebook post.
Right.
But these things are going to have further definition, just like the rules for what is a catch, to determine if it's a touchdown or inbounds or whatever. These kinds of things are just going to have to be, I mean, this is how, the judicial branch is going to change these things and force our legislators to go in and potentially amend this to specifically enumerate sex as between a man or a woman, or whatever the legislature ends up deciding, right? That's the great thing about the legislative branch. If we want to do something like that, we elect people that can. I mean, that's how Elliot Larson. That wasn't a petition drive, was it? No.
I don't know the history behind the act. I know it was 1976.
The amendment for last year.
Oh,
I don't think it was. So anyways,
the Roush World Supreme Court said to the legislature, "Are you going to amend your act or not?" I mean, and so the Michigan Supreme Court said that sex would include the definition of sexual orientation, same-sex marriage, but they didn't go into the gender identity area.
Right.
But it's now the law anyway. But in any event, again, the two issues are that what was put on Facebook doesn't apply to the law, because the law is a bookend. You're born with a gender and you can change your gender. And what Studio 8 said was, if you if a human identifies as anything other than a man or a woman, then I'm not going to accept your service. And what they were saying was this: don't come here and tell me that you're something that's not human, male or female.
Right.
Whatever that would be. A dog, a cat, a basketball, I don't know. But those are the words that were spoken, and they don't apply to the definitions. But even if they did, if everything lined up for the government, it's free speech.
It's free speech.
Right. She's permitted to, and they call it advertising as if it was an ad in the newspaper, and it wasn't. Her Facebook post is pretty extensive.
Yeah.
She talks about grievances, which is one of the tests for free speech, that you're allowed to vocalize and disagree with any of these things that exist here. And it again has fallen into that category that's questionable. But I always try to get right back to the basics. Think about this. In Colorado, there was an actual denial of service. It wasn't just a Facebook post.
Right.
People came into the cake shop, two men who were going to get married, and they asked for a cake, and he said no. Well, as we said earlier, how could you win? It's an actual. So, yes, denial of service can be won.
Right.
Under freedom of religion.
Despite what John Johnson said in that
exactly
in that little interview.
And when religion won, the justices said, "What about free speech?" Then came the 303 case, which was a pure website, and so. If people have time, read those cases. And you'll see in the 303 case that the website was a denial of service. No question.
Right.
No, I will not prepare a website for same-sex marriage. Violates the protected class, does it not? But when a law of public accommodation collides with the Constitution, Justice Gorsuch said there is no question which will prevail. And that is the Constitution. And that's why those two cases, one, they denied, but they were able to assert free speech and freedom of religion. It's those areas that are causing the most consternation. That's not going to work on race.
Yeah.
I don't believe that Irish should be able to eat at a burger restaurant. Well, does the Bible really say that? I don't believe that I should be able to serve Catholics. Okay, I don't believe in male or female, but the sexual orientation and the gender identity areas have created the most divisiveness. And gender identity hasn't been tested, but I'll say this: in Roush World case, the Michigan Supreme Court said, "Now hold on. Whether or not a person can assert religious beliefs, we do not decide." So they left that card on the table. And true, the U.S. Supreme Court in civil rights cases said, we think that under the Civil Rights Act, these definitions apply. And again, they said, except religion. Okay, so even if the government survives the definitional aspect, let's go to the basics. 2023, the law was not in effect. They survived that somehow. 2024, the law is in effect. They survived that somehow. They argue this isn't free speech. This is an advertisement in the newspaper. They survived that. How are they going to get by the assertion of religious beliefs when the courts have said in 2 Colorado cases that is something that we protect? You could almost argue that religious beliefs are protected greater than freedom of speech, but they're tied together in the same amendment of the Constitution. So is the government, as I said earlier, really going to come in here and say, we don't support free speech, and more importantly, we do not support freedom of religion?
Right. And I'm struggling since this whole thing has started, and I've been watching what you guys are going through, and reading all of these things. I'm trying to figure out if it's irony or if it's hypocrisy that this whole case is essentially silencing somebody's right to free speech because of somebody else's alleged civil rights are being violated. So ultimately what's happening is somebody's right to free speech and the right to their religion is being silenced by a state agency from 3 people that read something on the internet and are seeking money damages. Now, I don't know these people from anybody, and I'm not trying to disparage them, but it simply cannot be overlooked that they are looking for money damages for reading something on the internet. I just read something, I'm offended, now I'm going to file a civil rights complaint, and 24 or 5 other people are going to do the same thing, and I want money for something that I read on the internet. I cannot get past that aspect of the whole thing. And this is an attempt to silence somebody's free speech, whether you agree with it or not, whether you're a Detroit Tigers fan or not, right? Somebody says something online that disparages the Detroit. I'm just being ridiculous, but that's how ridiculous this all is. But having said that, there are people that this issue is important to. The trans, the binary, there are people out there that do identify this way, and that is the intent of the Civil Rights Act amendment last year. And I don't think for any moment that Christine was really actually trying to deny anybody's service. She's simply taking a position based on her religion, given what she's seeing in her culture area and what's going on. She asserted her belief. She asserted her right to free speech. She asserted her right to freedom of religion. And now an executive government branch agency is seeking to fine her on behalf of 3 people that read something on the internet.
Yep.
That to me is bonkers. Total bonkers. I understand why these people are attempting to do it. I want to dig a little bit more into potentially who might be funding or paying for legal fees and or potentially got these three individuals to file these complaints. The gal in the interview there we played up front. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more because I'm curious. I'm curious at why these people have chosen this battle that seems to be very, very unwinnable on its face. Are they that emotionally driven? And again, I understand emotionally driven to take this case and use it as the example of why the Civil Rights Act was amended last year. That to me is what they're attempting to do. The politicians and the city officials that have jumped on and made comment as well, I feel like they are bandwagoning this thing, if you will. But I can't make clear enough that it is an important issue. These civil rights things are important issues, depending, no matter what class you're talking about, marital status, race, religion, they're all important, and you shouldn't be taking one side or the other because free speech is nearly absolute, right?
Correct.
You don't have to agree. You don't have to agree about what somebody is saying, but we should all agree that you have the right to say it. And the government shouldn't be punishing somebody for their free speech.
Exactly.
Give you the last word.
Well, your words are, your free speech is equally important here. And I keep coming back to the examples to make this as clear as possible, because you hear about what someone is recreating. For example, in the 303 Colorado case, the website designer, Justice Gorsuch said that the dissent is reimagining the facts. Okay, so I'll hear in the media, for example, that Studio 8 told transgender clients to go to a pet groomer. Now, hold on. First of all, no one was told anything. Okay. Number two, I don't know what they mean by transgender because I only have a statute that says gender identity. Number three, they were not clients. Okay. But when you hear that, what you're believing is that a person went to Studio 8 and said, I am born a male and identify as a female. Can you please cut my hair? Studio 8 said, no, I don't agree with your description, and I will not cut your hair, go to a pet groomer. None of that happened. That's a reimagining the facts, right. Okay? And so that's why you want to look at the basics here. So back to Colorado. The cake shop owner has in front of him a birthday cake, and he has a wedding cake. And the two men come in, and he told them, I'll sell you a birthday cake. You can have a birthday. You may have the same birthday. I'll sell you two cakes, or you can share a cake. But I'm not endorsing your message. But I will not sell you the wedding cake. Now, wait a minute. He denied service. How can he prevail? And we're back to this idea of his freedom of religion. And to some degree, freedom of expression and freedom of speech. So denial, you wouldn't think denial could win. But in that case, they did. And the same thing with the web designer. So here, going back again to the basics, no service was denied. A person just spoke and said, if, hypothetically, a human being identifies as anything other than a man or a woman, I will not provide services. And the statute says will be. So we're talking about hypothetical on hypothetical. But even if it wasn't, you still have the free speech that exists here. And I think that one of the best examples I could think of is, if they still have them, remember the little coffee shop huts, like the little deer blinds, right?
Oh,
you
yeah,
drive
yeah.
up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all they did was had a pot of coffee and cups. That's all they had. Now forget about the ones that had donuts and stuff like that. And you would just pull up, and all you had to say was small, medium, or large cream and sugar. But let's leave that out. They just sell coffee, no cream, no sugar, just black coffee, and you're done. I think that that business can never refuse service to anyone, okay, irrespective of race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity, because it's a cup of coffee. They're not endorsing any of those messages. But remember, my example involves service, okay? We're talking about free speech here. And in the 303 case, which is the Colorado website, that's a service, right? But the Supreme Court said it's pure speech and you can't regulate it because of her religious beliefs. And I think the only two categories are sexual orientation and gender identity. They're going to have the most difficulties in those areas. But again, we're looking strictly at a speech issue. When I first came here, I was rereading the cake case, and Justice Thomas has some comments in there that I want to share because I think he articulates what we're talking about here. And he says, it is one thing to conclude that the Constitution protects a right to same-sex marriage, which it does. It is something else to portray everyone who does not share that view as bigoted. So you're welcome to support same-sex marriage, but you're also welcome to disagree with that. And that's what Studio 8 did, but in the gender identity area. I don't agree with it. But more importantly, she cited something that is not a protected class. But even if she did, it's still free speech.
Still free speech.
And she still didn't deny service. And even though the government will say, no, we can regulate that, I don't think so. They don't regulate the internet. They didn't regulate Facebook in 1976. But in any event, the final thing was, and we hadn't discussed this earlier, I went to the U.S. Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division, and it says, what does discrimination in a place of public accommodation look like? In every one of them, a restaurant refuses to serve an Asian American family. Refuses to serve. A bar turns away a patron, refuses to serve. Now, this is from the U.S. Department of Justice website. Two Asian American customers walk into a bar and are forced to wait an hour for service while white customers are served right away. Okay, in any event, it's denial of service. A hotel charges a certain race higher than another. That's act in conduct, okay? A club owner refuses entry to certain customers. A food stand employee at a sports stadium refuses to serve Chinese American customers. Okay, every one of them is about refusal of service. This is from the website of the U.S. Department of Civil Rights, who I'm quite confident takes very seriously their civil rights laws.
Sure.
But none of them talk about speech. And that essentially is the case. And so we'll be having a hearing with the agency in January or February of 2024, and with the circuit court also in February.
So it's going to be interesting to see. We can kind of see where they're trying to take it. We're going to be talking about this more as it comes along. Again, I think it's a confluence of so many crazy different things, and it's a really important issue for several reasons. But I appreciate you taking the time to break this down for us. We'll have many more conversations about it, I'm sure. It's going to, how do I want to say this? These issues are monumentally important given that free speech is the First Amendment, given that social media is the largest platform for free speech, regardless of which actual platform you're using. We also know that free speech by the federal government is being limited, and certain things are being funneled as dis or misinformation. the reason why this silly podcast even exists is to get the other side of the story, the full picture, all of the information, like you were saying before, not just one narrow view of it. So all of the information is out there, so anybody can make an informed decision on any of these kinds of issues. So we'll see. I mean, free speech is monumentally important. It's the reason why it's the First Amendment. Freedom of religion is monumentally important, regardless if you agree with what these people are saying or not. I'm not overly religious, so I would never go and say such a thing, but you know what? It doesn't matter because I stand behind Christine and Studio 8's right to be able to do so. So to me, that's where it is. Language is important. Here's a situation, again, where a law is being used and the language is being meandered and interpreted in such a way. And we'll keep an eye on these things as more and more of them come around, because we've seen a certain particular party using language over the years: climate change, climate disaster, global warming. Those are just a couple of things. And I think that this is a march towards that, to take these definitions and widen them out. And thankfully, we do have people, and not just, me or you or Studio 8 and Christine in this case, but many, many, many others are out there taking these issues to the courts. They're engaging in lawfare, if you will. And it's not cheap to do. And it's unfortunate that so many of these things have to be adjudicated the way that they are through state agencies, the way that they do. But either way, these are fascinating topics to look at. I love getting your opinion on things, and I love getting the baseline out there for people to understand exactly what is going on with something that is very, very, very important, especially going into an election year where so many things are in question and so many people want to run on this record or that record. I just find the whole thing fascinating. It is a culture thing that is definitely being injected here as well. We try to tamp that down a little bit, but I've rambled on enough. We got to get out of here because I'm pretty sure we're going on over an hour with this podcast, but we always do. We always do.
I have one more comment.
Yeah, go for it.
And I want you to have the last word. And I have to tell you that what influences me the most is when I talk to the folks, the guy at the bar, the girl at the bar, my clients, because their opinion about things is much more important than mine. They're the jury, if you will. I want to know what the folks are thinking about these things. And as you speak, as has always happened in the cases that I'm involved with, you always trigger ideas for me. And that's so important to get outside of my zone of perception and to hear what it is that you want to say. And I had some more ideas here. I still will give you the last word here. One of the things I said in my brief to both the court and to the agency was this. It is said this case is about transgenders, gender identity, and hatred. It is not. It is about whether the government may regulate the internet. They may not. It is about freedom of religion. It's about freedom of speech, all protected by the First Amendment. Which side is the government on? Is the government, your government, does not choose the unalienable rights of religion. It chooses tyranny. But let me add this. Quoting the U.S. Department of Justice, no reasonable person at a Lions game ordering a hot dog watches the vendor say, okay, here's your hot dog. And then to quote them, a Chinese American asks for a hot dog and they say no. Most reasonable people, rational people would say that's not right. You're going to sell that person a hot dog. Now, compare that to being able to simply speak your mind on Facebook. And anybody that's offended by that, you have to pay because they were offended. That's at the heart of the First Amendment in this case. Now, the government will tell you, no, wait a minute. What you said on Facebook violated state law and that's why you're responsible. But no state law can amend the Constitution. The Constitution runs the show,
Right.
not what the legislature did in response to the Constitution. And this is the final thing I wanted to say, then you can have the floor back. In a separate podcast, we can go through the 200 years of First Amendment cases in this country, of which the First Amendment won by religion or free speech. Every one of those cases, what the person said violated a statute, whether it was a criminal statute involving terrorism, involving civility. They all involve violations of statute. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a case.
Right.
So for the government to come in and say, no, wait a minute, you can say what you want on Facebook, but don't violate a public accommodation law. No. Every one of these cases that are out there about protesting the draft, that violated state laws. It violated federal laws. Flag burning, okay, is speech. Okay, the laws were on the books. I'm getting into my First Amendment arguments here. That was speech because the person was speaking out against the war.
Right.
Now, I'm personally offended by flag burning. There's a whole bunch of other cases out there. So that person broke the law, but they prevailed. Why? Because the First Amendment said you can speak and burn a flag, as offensive as that is. So the idea that, no, wait a minute, we have a statute that doesn't allow you to speak your mind is irrelevant.
Right. This stuff I'm learning so much, by the way. Thank you. It's like a free masterclass in some of this stuff here. We'll be keeping an eye on this, a couple of the other cases that are going on, some other things that I'm going to end up getting your opinion on as they come down. We've got the Supreme Court looking at minimum wage issue that they actually took some oral arguments on a week or two ago. So we'll be finding out some more stuff on that. I'd love your opinion on that later. I'm pretty sure we have like 4 or 5 podcasts we already mentioned we could pull out of this, but this is how complex some of these things are, and they're very important. So, David, thank you again for taking the time. You guys, thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, comments, drop them in below here. Make sure to subscribe everywhere you listen or watch a podcast, YouTube, Spotify, all those fun things. Be sure to check out Fuelcast TV at fuelcasttv.com. For David Delaney, I am Ian Murphy. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.